Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be getting into episodes 551 through 553, which will cover manga chapters 631 through 633. And now we're getting into the climax of the Fishman Island arc and getting into all the punchy battles. So, synopsis: things are at their most dire now, with the entire Fishman Island Royal Family captured along with Jinbei. Hody, with everything now seemingly under his control, reveals the truth about Otohime's assassination and commences his takeover of the island by commencing with the execution of King Neptune. But can Luffy and the Straw Hats make it in time to save everyone? Alright, on to differences. So there are quite a few. And the beginning half of episode 551 is entirely filler. As I mentioned in the last episode, we don't see Hody's new form, and it cuts from when the sea beasts freak out. There is a tiny bit of canon scenes kind of mixed in with that, when the Minister of the Left laments the fact that they were so close to achieving Queen Otohime's dream, and now this had to happen. But it truly doesn't actually return to the canon material till the moment we get to see Dekken show off his sort of new shaved head from his depressed episode. Next difference is, in the anime we actually see the Ammonites getting decimated by Hody's crew and the sea beasts, whereas in the manga we see the aftermath of them all defeated, and we just get a small flashback panel from the point of view of the citizens who witnessed this massacre. In the anime, Dekken's conversation happens on the Flying Dutchman, whereas in the manga, it happens at Hody's hideout. Another really curious change is when Neptune is strung up for the first time, and you see the Concord Plaza, and in that scene, the manga actually has Tsurume the Kraken also kind of looming large high up on the ridge. He's kind of like taking up the entire skyline and looking down at everyone. But for some reason in the anime, he's completely absent in that scene, which baffles me why he's not there, because it's not like he was that hard to insert in there. He's not moving or anything. You just literally have to draw him, and he could just be a very static object in the back. But it just seems weird that he's just absent from this scene entirely. There's an extra scene added of Jinbei and Shirahoshi leaving the sea forest on Megalo, seemingly having come to an agreement with Luffy, although we don't see what that agreement is. Now, this scene is completely absent in the manga to kind of set up the surprise of Luffy showing up later. The anime also shows Shirahoshi and Jinbei happening kind of all of their adventures happening in chronological order, while in the manga, this moment actually happens in a slight flashback after they've been captured. So all that stuff with them riding and then getting tricked by the fake balloon Neptune, that is actually kind of mentioned in the manga. Like, you see a silhouette of the balloon, but you don't actually get to see them get caught and the whole balloon exploding into a net. That's all added in the anime. The final few are more towards Hody and his sort of monologue about him explaining the whole situation. We actually see Hody meeting with and paying off the human pirate that he was going to frame, and you even see the events from Hody's perspective, including him betraying and murdering that human as well, which is something that's never shown in the manga. Another thing is Hody's sort of monologue about how he killed Otohime goes on for a bit longer as he kind of just talks more and more. And then finally, the anime takes the time to actually show the moment Megalo tells Shirahoshi that Hody was the one that killed Otohime, and this is just merely mentioned instead of actually shown. But yeah, that's it for all the differences, so let's get into the episodes themselves. So seeing as how the first half of episode 551 is almost entirely added fluff, I'll just start where the canon material starts, which is when we get back to Dekken, as he's in the throes of heartbreak over being rejected, and he's shaved off the top of his head, only make him look even more ridiculous and creepy. But the funniest scene for me is when he attempts to compose a haiku and writes one with too many syllables, which is even pointed out by him. And this sends Dekken into kind of this psychotic nature, and thinks of an idea to destroy everything. In the way the camera pans up, you can kind of guess what his plan is. And later we do in fact see an act of pure unhinged madness as Dekken decides to quote-unquote throw the massive Ark Noah at Shirahoshi, and thereby the island of Fishman Island, which would undoubtedly cause an untold amount of damage and loss of life, as well as perhaps even destroy the entire island, with it being mentioned that it's basically half the size of the entire island. And Oda again uses one of his tried and true ticking time bomb story tropes once again to add more tension to the story. And I've said it before, but each one is unique enough that I really never care that it gets that it gets kind of repetitive that he uses this at almost every arc. I mean, basically, we had that in Little Garden with the candle service thing and everybody turning into a candle statue. We saw that in Arabasta with the time bomb. You know, we saw that in Skypiea with the with NL's attack. And then, yeah, we saw that pretty much in NES Lobby as well, and in Water 7 with the Aqua Laguna, and then, of course, with Robin being taken to the Gates of Justice. I mean, almost every single arc uses this time bomb sort of mechanic to raise the stakes of the arc. And so, yeah, but each one is unique enough that I don't really care. And that may just be my biases of loving this series so much that I'm kind of turning a blind eye to that. But the idea that this time they're not even aware of this time bomb existing until basically it's relatively too late, like I feel like, as well as the fact that you're left on the edge of your seat because it leaves you wondering how they're going to stop something that big while also being busy fighting off Hody and his crew. And so, yeah, I know I had my idea of how it was going to play out in my head, just judging by all the story elements set up. And I believe this is pretty obvious. I mean, I think most people will come to this conclusion, but I won't spoil it just in case you haven't figured it out. But yeah, if you're kind of putting all the dots together, you'll kind of figure out how the only way to really stop this. Now with the plaza taken over and Hody's got Neptune strung up, the stage is set and he shows off his new power by shooting a water shot at a soldier trying to sacrifice himself and blowing up the new Fishman pirates. But now this thing is so powerful that it shoots through several mountains and travels what seems like over a few miles and finally kind of like dies out near the Mermaid Cove. And so if you're looking at the map that gets shown at like different points in this arc, it's like a third of the radius of Fishman Island. And I don't really know how big Fishman Island is, but it's a long distance from the Concord Plaza to the Mermaid Cove. Like you can see how much distance it covers on that map. And it's insane. The princes eventually arrive, and surprisingly, they are decently strong as they take out all the sea beasts in one hit. But they prove to be no match for the roided out Fishman pirates, or the new Fishman pirates, I should say. And I gotta say though, as strong as the princes are, the fact that they need those bubbles to even be able to fight properly is, I feel like, a huge weakness and disadvantage. Like, that should probably be addressed at some point by one of the engineers of Fishman Island to, like, maybe armor those bubbles or something, because they get popped so easily. Now, Shirahoshi, Jinbei, and Megalo are shown falling for the dumbest trap in the world. And when you watch this moment, it seems like the dumbest and most cartoonish way for them to be instantly captured. And when you read this part for the first time, I was thinking in the back of my head, there better be a reason for this because it just seems so out of place. And every time I watch this scene with other people, it's always funny seeing a similar reaction from them. And of course, we do find out that the reason why they fell for this trap was because they intentionally fell for it so that they can set up the fact that Luffy can be there and create this moment where everything is in a dire situation to the point where people will want Luffy to come out. And so later on, yes, it does get explained. But when you first see this and you're just like, this is the dumbest way to get caught ever. And thankfully it was intentional. But also you got to wonder like, how Hody's men didn't think that this was weird, that they just fell for this so easily. But yeah, I guess that's part of the comedy. With the entire royal family and Jinbei captured, Hody shows off his massive army of fishmen and human slaves, totaling 100,000 men, which is quite possibly the largest gathering of people we've seen thus far in the series, as this sets up for you-know-what, which I got super hyped for. Again, this is something I won't spoil, because this is not actually something that's shown in this episode. But then we get to a pretty minor but wild reveal as Madame Charlie shows up to tell Hody that even if he succeeds, his kingdom won't last very long due to her fortune of Luffy showing up to destroy the island. And the reveal is, as she gets shot by Hody, she is actually the younger sister of Arlong. And I didn't see that one coming at all. And it kind of makes you wonder how they both ended up going down such different paths. Like, they're basically nothing alike, apart from the fact that they're both types of sharks. And I like to think that maybe they were orphaned and split up at some point when they were young or very young. And Charlie probably worked at a mermaid cafe and using her fortunes. And Arlong had no choice but to turn to gangs and pirates in the rough streets of the Fishman district. And so in the grand scheme of things, it's not a very impactful reveal since, as I mentioned a while back, that Arlong really doesn't do much in terms of the story, as of yet at least, but it is still a very interesting connection. Then we get something that most of us saw coming, and something I've mentioned in the past is that Hody was in fact the one that shot and murdered Otohime and pinned it on a human to stop her movement, as well as turn the sentiment back towards hating humans. However, one thing that did take me by surprise was the reveal that Shirahoshi knew this whole time. And turns out that Megalo saw the whole thing and told Shirahoshi about it when she grew a little older. And this part kind of blew me away in the sense that I was really surprised at just what kind of a character Shirahoshi was, because the reason she kept that fact hidden is both heartbreaking and incredibly awe-inspiring, just how strong Shirahoshi is at such a young age. She kept this painful secret to herself, but the most incredible thing is that she, as her last promise to her mother, has done her best to let go of the hate so as to not perpetuate that cycle yet again. And I mean, Jinbei spells out exactly what most people are feeling at this moment, and it's a bit of just on the nose exposition for telling us how to feel, but I don't really feel any sort of taken out of that moment because of it. It's one thing to honor your mother's dying wish, but to actually carry something like this out in practicality is quite frankly incredible. Like, most anyone wouldn't be faulted for harboring hate for the man who killed your mother out of such malicious hate. But Shirahoshi did it and understood why it was so important. And yeah, like Jinbei says, she is really admirable for basically living her life like this for the last 10 years or so. I mean, it's incredible. Like, where do you find the strength to not harbor that kind of hate? And this right here is the main conflict and themes of Fishman Island as an arc. It's this idea of forgiveness and love versus vengeance and hatred. Hody embodies the philosophy of vengeance and hatred so much so that he even attributes the dire situation they're in all because she was stupid enough to forgive him and not seek out revenge, as he puts it. And he uses this moment to also pelt the royal family with shark arrows. And so, yeah, you see this idea of Hody kind of framing the pain that her family is suffering because she didn't hate and she didn't seek vengeance instead of, hanging on to that hatred. But Shirahoshi went another direction in that she followed her mother's teachings of forgiving and trying to spread love over that. And yeah, this sort of philosophical battle between Shirahoshi and Hody is kind of the main crux of Fishman Island as an arc, as well as sort of the whole human-fishman relationship that has basically permeated the entire story and will continue to permeate even going forward past Fishman Island. And so this sort of ideological battle is a very, very distilled, very simple way of portraying that. And this arc basically shows which one is the right way. And I mean, obviously we all know which is the right way. But also, just on a side note, when you're reading or watching this moment and seeing Hody and the new Fishman pirates all full of themselves, when the only reason why they're even able to beat them is because of PEDs, it's just annoying. And I know they're pirates, but they're cheating, and it gets irritating, especially when Daruma is just mocking them, saying the princes aren't much great warriors as they're said to be. I mean, it's debatable whether the princes could beat them, but I think they could have put up a good fight if there were no energy steroids involved. And just when your annoyance level with Hody is at an all-time high, this is when Oda decides to release all that in one of the more satisfying moments. The Fishman kids tell Madame Charlie that they'd rather see Luffy destroy Fishman Island than see it fall into the hands of Hody. Eventually, the whole island is on board with this sentiment as well. Oh, and before we move on, one other translator's note about the attack that Hody uses to torment Shirahoshi by continuing to harm Neptune and the princes, which is called Yabusame or Shark Arrow. So, Yabusame is actually a real thing in Japan. It refers to a mounted archery ceremony where they ride on a horseback and fire these sort of bulb-headed arrows at three targets. It was originally used as a military archery training exercise dating all the way back to the 12th century, from my research. And here's where the interesting part comes in. As Yabusame when it's translated, it's basically horseback archery. But as many of you already know, that the word same is Japanese for shark. So that term basically can also be read as shark archery or shark arrows as it's translated in the subtitles. And ya in the yabusame is arrow. So yeah, it's kind of a weird and interesting double meaning for that name. With King Neptune at Hody's mercy about to be executed and Shirahoshi crying out for Luffy to save them, we get one of the coolest, satisfying, and frankly funniest Luffy entrances as Megalo starts to convulse and then freaking pukes up Luffy and comes out charging out with Gear Second already active and launches Hody into the cliffside like a missile. And they really knew this scene had to be the scene. And they actually took extra care to animate this moment with some extra like time and budget dedicated to it, with much more fluid and detailed animation. And you can tell with the more varied line work as well as the more effort on the shadows and lighting. Some people don't like the overly glossy look of when they shift to this art style for these big moments, but I'll take this over the flat animation any day. Another thing about this scene in the anime is that it's a bit more drawn out as Luffy kind of starts to punch his way out of Megalo and Hody kind of stops swinging his sword. While in the manga, this all happens so quickly where Megalo just basically barfs up Luffy almost instantly and then just pummels Hody before he can even react. And I think this is a case of the different takes kind of fitting each medium. Like, I don't think one is necessarily better than the other, but they both work well for their respective mediums, whether it be in animation or in comic book form. And yeah, the changes don't necessarily, change anything fundamental about the storytelling or the intent behind the scene. It's just, I think with animation, you can actually take some more time to show Luffy busting out of Megalo and then flying at Hody, which is really cool. Whereas in the manga, I think it keeps the momentum going by just having the panels just pop, 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 and going to the next one and seeing everything happen in quick succession because you get that momentum in the manga. Whereas in the anime, you can show momentum just by motion. So you don't really get that in manga. So I think they both work well for their respective mediums. Of course, by now it's become clear why we never saw the resolution to Jinbei and Luffy's argument, as this was a setup from the get-go, as Nami also reveals that she and Robin were already nearby with Nami's Mirage Tempo waiting for the right moment to free Neptune and the princess, and they've already gone ahead into the Ryugu Palace to recover the Celestial Dragon letter so that it is safe as well. And then this is where we get really cool, like, epic moments, and where we get Overtaken being played in the background, and we get the arrival of the Straw Hat Pirates post-time skip in their glory with Jinbei right alongside them, in hopes that, by this point, it's become pretty clear that there is a possibility that Jinbei may actually join with the way he's sort of set up here, as well as when you see this part compiled into the Tankoban manga volumes, and you see that cover, the cover that I mentioned, volume 64, you see Jinbei right alongside everyone posing, and it looks awesome. And you're just like, at this point, I was fully on board with the theory that Jinbei was going to join the crew. And the remaining crew even do, a slight walk off of the Sunny, as well as Robin and Nami all walking towards the main center of the Concord Plaza to kind of recreate that feeling from the walk of Arlong Park. And yeah, for all of Fishman Island's faults, I absolutely love this moment so much, to see them all together like this again, ready for combat. And in the crazy thing too is like, when I visited Japan probably around 2015, I actually bought, they were selling these like not giant poster sizes, but the smaller poster size of this 2-page spread of this group shot from the manga, and in chapter 633. It's the final 2 pages, and I don't know why they don't sell these anymore, because I wish they would do this for more panels, but I was lucky enough to get one of these, and I have them hanging up in my room, and it looks awesome. The anime, though, unfortunately, this group shot just doesn't look anywhere as cool as it does in the manga. Like, it still conveys the same thing, but it's pretty much a still image, even in the anime, yet the composition just feels off for one, the characters are just too far apart from each other, and there's too much empty space. The character models look very basic and lack any detail, and they don't even show the actual money shot, because it cuts away before Luffy looks up and crosses his arms as he yells, "You decide for yourself." Like, there's so much more character and life in the manga panel for this money shot, ironically, and it's so disappointing that they basically blew their budget and time for the Luffy entrance and probably ran out of time and money for this scene. Like, do yourself a favor if you've never seen the manga version of this moment, because it looks so cool. Like, the detail is way more cooler, and there's just more energy. Like with Usopp and Brook particularly, they're much more animated in the manga, again, ironically. As you can see, Brook behind Luffy with this huge smile, or he's even kind of laughing. And then Usopp has this really concerned yet determined look that he's kind of got his hand up to his forehead, kind of looking out and just freaking out over the number of troops that Hody has. Also, Frankie is much more visible with this huge grin popping out from behind the Sunny's figurehead. It's far more pronounced, and you can see it way better. And yeah, it sucks that seemingly they had to either choose Luffy's entrance or to do the money shot, the group money shot. I mean, I guess if I had to choose, yeah, I would definitely I would have prioritized Luffy's entrance, but it's just unfortunate that this scene got kind of the short end of the stick for this one, because it's such a cool shot. It's all of them grouped together in this really epic moment. So yeah, definitely at least check this chapter out in the manga, chapter 633, and just look at this page, because it looks so much better. One other fun fact is we get a Panda Man sighting in episode 553 at the 21-minute, 30-second mark on the Crunchyroll stream. And you can see him kind of standing off to the far right of the frame among the other Fishman Island citizens on the cliffside, looking down at the Sunny, which has just kind of touched down at the center of the plaza. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. But yeah, in closing, the Straw Hats are finally here together to begin battle against Hody and his forces, which we will get into in the next episodes. But yeah, if you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment, and if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram and Twitter account at SunnyGo Podcast for updates when I post new episodes or to see pictures of my manga collection. And yeah, as always, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen to my podcast. This August 2nd was actually the 4th anniversary of when I started this podcast, so it's been 4 years since I've started this now officially, and so yeah, and we're coming up on episode 200 as well. So again, thank you so much for everyone's support and all the kind words that you've left in various media or social media outlets, as well as on the podcast pages themselves. I can't thank you enough. And yeah, I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.